You're live.
All right.
So, welcome everybody to yet another edition of the Bench Doctor. I apologize that this is going to have to be uploaded after the fact since something has gone amiss with our stream. So I need to rejigger that after the show. Tonight, Scott's going to show us all about the Glock, which I believe he called a brick in the actual invite. So
I didn't call it that.
somebody called it a brick.
That was the Glock owner.
It was the Glock owner called it a brick. So we're going to see the plastic fantastic in all its glory. It looks like he's got a couple of variations on the screen. If you've got questions, well, the only people that can ask questions right now are the people that have decided to actually show up for the Zoom, which means you guys get priority. Everyone else doesn't get to ask questions because it's going to be after the fact. So if you're watching this after the fact, go ahead and drop a comment on whichever stream channel you're on, whether it's Twitch, Twitter, or Facebook, and we will try to get to you and make sure your questions get answered. Without further ado, Scott.
All right. Well, after so many weeks of weird old revolvers, I thought maybe we'd change gears and come back to the 21st century and cover guns that people actually own and use. And Glocks are so common, I thought I would take one apart, show you how to take one apart, and then all of the pieces that you can upgrade on one of these and how to do the upgrades. I don't have I've already upgraded both of these, but I'll take the parts out and show you what's involved, and you'll see how easy it is if you want to change the connector or the trigger spring or the striker. Any of those things are really easy to get to on these. So in front of me, I have a Glock 21. This is a surplus gun, ex-police gun. I don't know what department, but it's a surplus. It's got a lot of holster wear on it, but it runs really well. And then this is a polymer 80 lower, and with some Glock parts in it, but it's essentially a Glock. The difference being that the grip angle is slightly different on them. Some people absolutely hate the Glock grip angles. So, but if you want the Glock reliability or the Glock upper, Glock guts, you can put a polymer 80 lower on it, and it gives you more of a 1911 style grip angle. So that's one option available to you, and it's a really easy thing to accomplish if it's legal where you live. Some states don't allow them. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll take this one apart. As you can see, it's got a chamber flag in it. We have no ammo in the gun. I have no ammo on my bench. So first thing you're going to do, of course, is drop the magazine and double check, make sure it's clear. And then to get the upper off, you just drop the slide, pull the trigger, and then you're going to grip it. I grip it right up here under the beaver tail, and then I use these fingers right here to pull it back just slightly. And then you grab both sides of the takedown here, and then it should slide forward like that. So that's how you remove the upper from the lower. Very straightforward. Now, first thing I'm going to do is I'll take the upper apart and show you how to get the striker out. Here is your recoil spring and guide rod. This one has a threaded barrel, which I realize is illegal in California, but it is legal where I am. So take my threaded barrel off. And then if you run a threaded barrel, I don't have a can on this gun currently, but I use this thread protector on there, and I keep an O-ring between the thread protector and the barrel, and it keeps it from loosening when I shoot. Used to not have the O-ring on there, and the thing would constantly get loose on me. So this is a little tip to help you keep that thing together. The barrel just slides out like most other guns, like so. Now, for a good deep cleaning on these things, or if you wanted to upgrade the striker, this is your striker assembly here. Also, sometimes you get a spring kit, and it comes with the spring for the striker. It comes with the spring for the little safety here. So I'm going to show you how to get those out. What you're going to do is on the bottom of the slide, I don't know if this is going to show up, but they're right under the striker. There's a little ledge there, a little black tube. The striker rides in that tube as it goes through this channel. So you're going to push down on that, and that relieves a little bit of the spring tension. And then you can slide this back plate off. So it looks kind of like this. I'm going to be pushing down on it and push forward with my thumb like that. Okay. And then you can just slide the striker right out. So what we're doing is we're pushing down right here inside the gun. You're just pushing down on that, which depresses the spring just a little bit. And then pull down with your thumb, and this will come right off. So that's another thing that is a common upgrade on these, is to replace these rear plates. They have all kinds of stuff on them. This is just one I got free from a local gun shop. But they have them with, you know, all kinds of silly things on the back of them. So that's your striker. And from here, to get this spring off, this spring is often a wear part. And it comes in a kit like from Wilson or Lone Wolf. To get this off, we're going to depress the spring just a little bit. And there are these two little cups right here. There's two, they go together, two pieces that fit down in there, and then they rest. The spring pushes them up on a shelf here. And these are real fun. They're easy to lose. So you kind of, I pull down on the spring, and I pull the little cups out and let go gently. There's your spring. That piece can be upgraded or replaced with a different tension. They sell them in different poundage. But unlike a lot of guns, the heavier the spring, the lighter the trigger pull on a Glock. It's counter to you know, a lot of other guns where the lighter the spring, the lighter the trigger. It doesn't work that way on Glock. So there's that spring. And these are the two cups. You can see these tiny little plastic parts, and these are super easy to lose. So I have a baggie with about 6 of them around, and these are all the same size for the 17, 19, 21. I don't think they vary the size of these things from model to model. A lot of these parts are interchangeable. This is your striker. If you needed to replace this part, this little sleeve comes off if that were to get damaged or worn. This is the tip that is striking the primer, so you might want to inspect that. But also, if you take this out, clean it really well. This needs to be dry. You don't lubricate this stuff. Glock tells you not to lubricate the striker. So a lot of people mistakenly put oil down there, and what happens is it gums up the works in here, and it starts to attract grit and carbon, and then you start getting light primer strikes, and the gun starts malfunctioning. So I take it out periodically and clean it, make sure it's bone dry. You'll see there's no lubricant on this. So to put this back together, I'm going to go ahead and slide my spring back over. And this is fun. You get to depress this all the way down and put these little sleeves back in. And that goes in there. And you will send one of these flying the first time you do it. It is really not fun to do. Okay, let's see if I can get the other side. I'm not aware of a special tool to do this. You might use a little pick or a screwdriver or something, but so that's how it goes back together. These little cups just sit down inside the spring, and then they rest up against a little shoulder here on the striker, the firing pin side. Okay, and then we can also take out, there's a little safety spring in here. This is part of your internal safety. And to get that out, we pop this little piece out here. There's another spring in there, this little piece. That one doesn't usually come in the kit to replace it. So you maybe want to inspect it, but it's not usually one that gets replaced. It's a two-piece thing. This just sits down inside that spring. Then once that's out, you can pull your extractor. This piece, these will crack or break sometimes. It's nice to have a spare one. You can get them that are upgraded from cast metal to a more hardened steel, but it's good to clean these out. And then inside here is a little plunger and a little spring. So I just turn it over and give it a tap. And there's the plunger, and there's the spring. This spring often comes in a kit as well. So those are all the pieces. That's a completely disassembled upper. And if you build one of these, when you get an upper kit, it comes with all of these parts. And then you get just the stripped upper. And there's also a plastic sleeve that fits down in here for this striker to ride in. And I think it acts as sort of a lubricant and a guide for the striker in this channel right here. You'll see down through there's a channel that runs down this way. I like to take a jag or a cleaning patch and come down in here and dry this out and make sure I get all of any oil or contaminants out of there when I clean these things, just because they want it to run dry. So to put it together is just the opposite. When you put this spring in, make sure that it's oriented up and down. It is easy to get them in there sideways. Unfortunately, it will go in sideways. I like to guide it with a pick or something like that to make sure it goes in up and down. This plunger is pretty self-explanatory. It's got this hollow cavity that fits over the spring. That drops in there like that. And then I test it, make sure that it is indeed springy. Your extractor goes in. You can see your little extractor edge here. This is what's grabbing the case and pulling it out. So, and it goes in. I put my finger over that to hold it in place. There's a little round, I don't know if it's showing up, but there's a little round indentation right here that corresponds to this round part of the extractor. So that just drops straight in there. And then to hold it together, we put this spring back in, and it just drops straight down like that. Okay, and then you kind of push it, make sure that it's locking in place, and you'll feel it. Okay, and then we put our striker back in, like so. Test that spring, make sure it's got some spring tension on it. Now to put this back together, what I'm going to do is I put it nose down like that, and then I kind of just push down with my finger or thumb on this sleeve. But then you're going to need something to push this plunger down. So I just use a punch or a screwdriver, kind of push down, and then that lets that slide over. So then you can take this and make sure that the plunger is working properly. That should be under quite a bit of spring tension. So that's how you disassemble and reassemble a Glock slide. The barrel is pretty self-explanatory. If I were going to replace this, I wouldn't bother taking the spring off. I'd just replace the whole assembly, the guide rod and the spring at one time. To do the lower, this is the part that's most commonly upgraded on these things, which is the connector and a little spring in there. And it seems daunting to take everything out of one of these guns, but it's really not that difficult. You have 3 pins, one here, and one here on the grip. So I have a pin block, but you can use just a piece of wood with a hole drilled in it, works just as well. I align that over one of the holes, take my punch, just tap these little pins out. And these won't be in there very tight. These should be loose. There's no need to have them super snug. Pop these out like so. And then notice that your larger of the two is on the bottom. It's hard to screw it up because you can't force that big one into the smaller slot. There we go. Pull these out. And you'll notice people often confuse these 2 pins because they're fairly similar. The one that has the kind of flared ends on it goes on the top part of the frame. It goes up here in this slot instead of back here. Sometimes people will take this one and pound it down through there. And it's not a good idea. I think it sort of works, but I've seen them that way. I usually take them apart and try to correct that. So from here, now you can just pull everything out of the gun. Here's the piece that you generally want to take out to do your upgrades, is this whole trigger assembly. And you just have to kind of wiggle it out of there. Here is your whole slide lock. You set that aside. You can pull out this block if you want, if you need to replace it, but there's usually no reason to take this out. But here is the trigger assembly, and the piece that is generally that's to smooth a trigger out is this piece right here, this connector. And then there's a little spring right down in here. So the trigger upgrades on these is usually to replace this piece and that little spring. To get them out, this arm comes across, it lays over the top of the connector, and then it has this cruciform that lays over the top of the spring that fits in this slot. So to get them out, I just kind of pull slightly. You don't want to get too fancy with this because you'll damage the spring, but I just kind of rotate it out like that. And that's the spring that's in there. So you can unhook this, and you'll notice the spring hooks on right here on the back of this piece, and then it hooks on to the front of this piece. And there's a little slot. I'll go ahead and take it all the way out. Get it out of there. I want to do it without bending the spring up. There we go. So you'll notice that where it fits into this piece, there's a little kind of slot right there. It kind of tells you where that thing goes. Once you get that out, you can now get your connector out. And this piece, this one's been upgraded. The original Glock ones have kind of an indentation on both sides, and there are what give you that kind of squishy textbook Glock trigger, that kind of gritty, not smooth Glock trigger. If you replace this piece, it will smooth it out quite a bit, and it will lessen your trigger pull just slightly, but it will make it feel much smoother. And to get that out, you can just take a little screwdriver or something, and it just kind of pops up. It's not under a lot of like that. It just pops out. So that's called the connector right there. And this one is, like I said, I think it's a Lone Wolf connector. They're cheap. They're less than $20 to replace this piece, and it will make a big difference if you don't like the feel of your Glock trigger. You don't have to replace this part, with enough rounds.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
Would you move your hand a little bit lower than the block that you have? There you go. You keep going up out of frame.
Well, you're going to have to just use your imagination. So you can get away with not replacing this. The trigger will smooth itself out over thousands of rounds, but if you want to get to a smoother trigger quicker, just replace this piece. So that's pretty much it. That's the complete disassembly of a Glock, with the exception of taking the mag release out, which is just a spring down in here. You take that spring out, and then this whole part slides through. But I'm not going to take that out. It's just a long, straight spring. To reassemble this, it just goes back together the same way you took it apart. You'll notice there's a little slot right here. This leg of it drops straight in, and it fits. You'll see that there's this cut that's angled for it. So it's kind of hard to mess that up. It just goes right in there and lays flush. And then we take our little trigger spring and this piece. I like to connect it to the front first, right here. And you just kind of hook it on there like that. And you can see where that little leg of the spring is riding in that channel that I'd pointed out earlier. Then from here, you just hook it on right here. That goes in this little hole, and there's a little channel right above it that the spring rides in, and then the spring sits down in here. So it's a little bit weird to kind of twist this thing around and get it back in. But as long as you're not applying a whole ton of pressure or torque to it, you'll get it. It just takes a little bit of time. See, that's hooked in there like that. Okay. Now let's put it back in. Oh, it just came disconnected. Uncommon. Okay. This is always fun to do. All right. So now what we need to do is get this back rotated up. and around like that. And then we need to get that arm back in where we took it out. So this cruciform has got to go back in that slot, and it just takes a little bit of kind of twisting and torquing to get it to go like that. So now that's back in place. And you'll might struggle with that just a little bit, but don't let it bug you. Don't really get frustrated and yank on that spring because you'll bend it and end up damaging it. So once that's out, we then have this piece that drops back into the frame, and it kind of just rides. It's contoured like that beaver tail, so it kind of gives you a hint as how it goes back together. And this is your rear rail. That doesn't need to come out. You can, but it just comes out easily on this gun. It's held in place by the pin back here. I just like to get everything out of my way. Now to get the trigger back in, we have to drop it down through this slot, and it takes a little bit of a wrangling to get it in there. It takes a little bit of finesse. Sorry if this looks awkward. It is awkward. Hold on just one second.
We appreciate the realism.
Well, it's the struggle, but this is how it's done. If you took it into...
Would you like some questions while you're doing that?
Sure, go ahead.
How often, after so many number of rounds, should Glocks be disassembled and cleaned, both field strip and detail stripped?
Oh, I think they should be field stripped. Well, you know, there are people that never clean Glocks. You know, and then there are people that are fastidious about it. I don't think either way is wrong. As far as detail stripping it, I do it about every 6 months, but that's because I like to keep that channel dry where the striker is, because that's what Glock tells you to do. But I honestly don't know how often Glock recommends you detail strip one of these things. I would say, you know, maybe 5 or 10,000 rounds, you might want to take it apart, and for, if nothing else, just to inspect everything and make sure you don't have a whole bunch of spring wear. Yeah, and you know, check the firing pin and all that stuff. So there it drops back into place. Our trigger is right there. Okay, now we can put our pins back in. So our smallest pin goes up top. See, that one just slides right in. And then we do the one that looks kind of like a barbell. It's got the two flared ends. Oops, the two flared ends on it right here. And that drops in there. Oops. Get that back down. Oh, I forgot too. We have to, this is our slide release. So if you'll notice, there are some slots in the back of the trigger right here. We need to put it in the correct slot. So it goes in right, the one that hugs right next to the frame. Goes in right there, and it slides in and over the rail right here. So as we put this pin in, this pin is kind of retained by the leg on this slide release. So you need to pull this leg down as you push that pin in. Grab a screwdriver here. See if I can do this from this angle. Give you some clue as what's going on. So I pull that spring down. Like that. Oops. Hold on a second. Oh, it never fails. Okay. Oop. Yikes. I just dropped my disconnector down into the drawer. Anyway, you can see it's fun. Pop that pin back out.
While we're
watching me flail.
Yep. What solvents do you recommend for cleaning Glocks?
Yeah, oh, geez, you could use any kind of I use Hoppy's #9 primarily, but you could use CLP or Ballistol or what I do a lot with, and you do this at your own risk. It seems to work for me is I use the non-chlorinated brake cleaner, this stuff, and I just spray the heck out of it. It stinks, so you're going to want ventilation, but it really removes a lot of grime. And then once I'm done with that, I take patches and cleaning rods and clean everything with Hoppies, and then I lubricate it and put it all back together. But
And what lubricant do you use?
I use this stuff. I use mostly the Lucas gun oil and gun grease. I use a lot of that stuff, but any gun oil will really work. There's no, any just lightweight oil works. So let me make sure I got that. For some reason, that's not wanting to go back in where it needs to. But I've heard of a lot of people using like just real lightweight motor oil, like 0W20. A lot of people do that, and it won't hurt. Any just lightweight oil. Be easy on it though. Glocks don't require a lot of lubrication. I'm understanding why this spring doesn't want to play nice today. That trigger down. Like so. That in place. There's really not a lot of places to lubricate one of these. Let me get this one. This is a weird angle to be doing this, where I try to show it on camera.
Yay, a hammer.
Yeah, well, there we go. All right, so once that's in place, we can then put our rear pin in. Yeah, you knew there had to be a hammer. That's
Hammer on the brick.
like I said, none of these should be hard to get in, to take out or put in. With the slide, this should be pretty familiar to everybody that's field stripped a gun. And then that goes forward. Press the spring just slightly. This is a new angle to work from so that I don't get yelled at by Eric for having my video upside down. Now with Glocks, the takedown and reassembly is really easy. You just slide it back on like that and it locks back into place. Trigger. Then I like to keep my finger on the trigger, move the slide, check the reset. So it reset right there, click, let my finger off. You can feel the reset right there, click.
We could hear it too.
Yeah. Then I put my O-ring back on. You may or may not need to do this. Then go on here. Screw my thread keeper. So that's the inside out. That's the guts of a Glock. They're all the same. The difference on the 21 here, let me break it down a little bit and take as you can see, the locking lug or locking block is a little bit longer, and it has this forward bit of rail on it.
You'll need to bring it back. There you go.
This forward little bit of rail, it doesn't exist on the P80s, but essentially the P80 has this piece and this piece. That's the only real difference between them and the grip angle. But it's really the same gun. These parts will come right out of this gun and fit right into that one. When you build one of these Glock P80s, if you're interested in doing one, really all you need to do is you're going to shave down the frame right here. It has a couple of sections. It has a jig that you pop this into, and you have to take those two pieces off. And then you have to remove material right here where the guide rod and recoil spring go. You have to kind of take a Dremel or something, a file, and round that out so that the guide rod can travel through there. But that's the 20% on a polymer 80 that you finish. But that's pretty much it. And then you just put the pieces back together just like I did. And that's really all there is to building one of them. So don't let it scare you. If you like the Glock but don't like the grip angle, the polymer 80 is a good solution to that problem. The problem is that in your state, you may not be able to own one. They're restricted in a lot of places. So any more questions on the
There are several.
Glocks? Okay.
First question: do you have a number 2 pencil so you can show people that firing pin check trick?
Oh, well, we could probably do it with this. You're talking about this?
Yep, but I think you'll have to put it in camera. Yeah.
You can shove a golf pencil down the barrel of your gun. This is just a little pick that I have. So what you do is you put it down the barrel like so. You can rack the slide, and that sets the trigger. And then now I'm gonna pull the trigger, and you'll see it pop out of there. And that tells you that your firing pin is working. Be careful doing that. It will send a pencil pretty far. So be careful which way you point that. Of course, as a gun owner, you should always be pointing it in a safe direction anyway. But yeah, that's a good way to test your firing pin and that striker spring. So
hey Scott, I got one more sort of question
Sure.
observation. If you take it apart and you can't get it back together again, or you think you lost a part, then obviously you probably shouldn't operate the gun, right?
Yeah, there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing that's extra on one of these. If you're missing a pin, if you lose one of the pins, it's probably going to jam up on you. Something's going to come loose. I don't think I wouldn't mess around with it. I would just order another part. A lot of gun stores carry Glock parts. The real simple stuff like the springs. These pins aren't hard to get. None of these parts are hard to get. There are a lot of manufacturers, and I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't recommend it either.
And at the level of taking apart for your every couple thousand round cleaning, that's if you're comfortable taking things apart to this level. Obviously, field stripping is good enough. I know people who never clean the damn Glocks, so taking the slide off, scrubbing out the barrel, taking the recoil spring off, to the extent that anybody ever does this.
Yeah, you got to be careful with if you reload. Glocks have a hexagonal rifling in them. Well, they just have a hexagonal rifling in them. So if you're using uncoated or unplated bullets, be real careful and clean it diligently and watch for leading in the barrel, because it's not recommended that you run just pure lead in the original Glock barrels. You can get an aftermarket Glock barrel that has the regular rifling in it and run all of the uncoated bullets you want through it. But if it's the original Glock barrels, be very, very careful of that and keep an eye on the leading situation, because it will build up and then the projectiles get stuck. All kinds of bad things happen. So I don't run anything but plated or coated bullets through the Glock barrels. It's just not worth it to me. And I don't.
And I'd say, of course, if anybody feels like this is beyond their skills, if it doesn't go back together, go find a gunsmith.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on Discord or Facebook, and I'll try to help you as much as I can. But I just wanted to show taking it all apart, because those are the pieces that if you decided you wanted to upgrade your gun or do a spring swap, that's what you're going to end up doing, is taking that gun apart and taking those pieces out, and go nice and slow. The worst part of it is those little cups that hold the striker spring. Those are tedious. Maybe when you order your spring kit, order a couple of extra ones. They are easy to lose, and the gun won't operate without them. The spring will come off and cause problems. They're a little $2 part, and it's just worth having an extra one. But yeah, like Ed says, if you don't feel comfortable with it, don't take it apart that much. Just field strip it and make sure that you keep oil out of the striker channel. What happens? A lot of people put oil right here, and that's not what's needed. When I lubricate a Glock, I just take a little bit of grease and I put a little bit of grease in these where the slide where the rails go. Just a dot here, a dot there, one up front, and then I might put a little bit of oil on the spring. Just because it's a flex part. That's really all that's needed on these. You don't need to put a ton of grease on them. People tend to over lubricate these things, and they actually run worse. With a lot of guns run really well wet. A 1911, you can run them pretty wet, an AR-15, but these aren't that way. You're going to want to keep these fairly dry. I just use a little bit of grease on the rails. You can see on this frame the grease here and here. And you can see what's happening is this is a really light colored blue grease, and you can see the carbon is already attracted to the grease that's on there. This is the color that it's supposed to be, is this kind of aquamarine, and it turns black, and you can see the filth that builds up on these parts. So that's why you don't put a lot of lubricant on there. And if it gets down into that striker channel, the striker will get gummed up, and it may not have enough force to actually fire the gun. So that's all the lubrication I do on these.
So there are several questions.
Okay.
You talked about the leading with regard to the polygonal rifling.
Uh-huh.
If you're going to shoot leads, just straight unplated bullets, do you recommend swapping for a normal lands and grooves style barrel?
Yeah, if you're gonna reload and just shoot, lead, then yeah, I would barrel's $100 for pretty much any of the 19 or 17 or the 21 barrels. There's so many manufacturers and there's so much competition that it's easier to just swap the barrel than it is to risk leading it up. And getting the lead out of a barrel is not a lot of fun. It is
not.
Yeah. I have a trick that works really well for it, though, if you want to hear it, is I take a brass brush, a brass cleaning tip, and I pull apart, those Chore-Boy copper pan scrubbers. You pull a piece of the Chore-Boy off of that and wrap it around that brass, and then get it in some solvent and run that down the barrel, and it will actually pull that lead out of there. A couple of passes through that will really break that lead up. Let's see if I can find my special super duper rod that has that tip on it. Show you what I mean. Here we go. So you can see this is just a regular brass tip, but I've wrapped this copper Chore-Boy all over it, and it's softer than the surrounding steel, but it grabs that lead and just yanks it out of the lands and grooves on barrels. So if you do have to de-lead a barrel, that helps a lot.
Nice. Next ones are all kind of related. Why all the cuts on the slide? Why does making it lighter matter?
Oh, I don't. They're called lightning cuts. I honestly don't know why they do that. Sometimes they'll do it to port the barrel, but it doesn't make any sense on this gun. I think it's just it's a looks thing. I think people like the aesthetic, but what I don't like about it is it makes the gun so light. When you're dealing with recoil control, you want all that weight up top to keep that gun, steady and low. By lightening it just makes it a little bit flippier. So I think it's more of an aesthetic thing. It doesn't really do anything for me. This is the only one I have. I got it in a trade, wheeling and dealing, and that's why I own it. I've never spent the money on a lightened slide like that.
In addition to that, the Glock 34, which is the longer competition style, has a cutout on the top of the slide.
It's probably a port. Yeah, I don't know.
It is not.
It's not?
It is not. No, the Glock 34 just has lightning cuts as well.
Okay. Yeah, there's it seems to be-
Associated with the lighting, well, let's try that again. Associated with lightening the slide, do you have to worry about different weight recoil springs? We had someone in the Discord say that they're having problems because they have a windowed slide and they have inconsistent extractions with lighter ammo, but heavier ammo runs fine.
Yeah, it might make a difference. I just have the stock one in here. I've never changed it. I don't have any problems with it. How it depends on how old the gun is. You might want to just put a new extractor spring in there and plunger. That may be part of the problem.
Gotcha.
Give it a deep cleaning.
Are there now you were talking about spending the money on the lightning cuts and the Gucci Glock, as everyone calls it, right?
Yeah.
Are there truly any benefits to any of that additional money, or would you suggest a $500 Glock and $1,300 worth of training over an $1,800 Glock?
I would buy a bone stock Glock, spend $20 on a trigger upgrade, and run the heck out of it and learn to run it the way it is. The stuff I always see people do to them is put the flared mag wells on them for quick mag changes, and I think people go down the rabbit hole. With the lightning cuts and all of the Gucci stuff doesn't make you any better of a shooter. And honestly, I probably shouldn't shoot a gun blindfolded, but I'm sure if you were blindfolded, you wouldn't notice much difference. They're doing all the same things that you can do to which is putting new springs in it and a new connector, and the rest of it's cosmetic to me. It doesn't make any difference. I would suggest buying a bone stock Glock, upgrade the trigger, and run it. Most people upgrade the triggers on these things. The factory trigger is just, I don't know, gross. They don't have a great reputation. They work great, but they just don't feel good if you're used to a SIG or especially a 1911. You can't beat that trigger. But if you go from a 1911 to one of these, you're going to hate the trigger.
Yes. Now, looking at the two magazine releases that you have there, how would you go about upgrading that? You said there was just a spring?
Yeah, I'll pop the slide off. This has got an extended mag release on it. You can see it sticks out farther on the frame, and then it's got also an extended slide. This release here too. Well, this one's got a slightly bigger one, but yeah, let me get this, double check it, get it apart. And let's see if I can get that one out of there. Get this out of the frame. So find the easiest way to, I'll have to show you after I get the spring out rather than try to explain it. Let me find the right tool for this job. I don't know if this has got the oomph to do it. Yeah, it doesn't. Sorry, I'm going to be out of frame here because I can't see what I'm doing. Just can't see it. The lighting's terrible. Bend that spring out of my way. There we go. Okay, so pop my slide release off. So it sits down in the gun this way, like that. This is flush with this side, and you can see that there's a little notch right here. There's a spring down in here, right there, that you bend, and then it drops into this slot, and that's what holds it in place. So to get it out of there, you just take a screwdriver and you move the spring until it's parallel, or until it's in this slot, and then it pops out, and then this piece just falls out. So to swap one, that's all you have to do. Now get this one out is a little bit more difficult, but to do if you wanted to swap it for say ambi, mag release, that's all you would do. You just put this back in there. Like I said, this L part, well, there's the spring in there. You can see it right there. I don't know if you see that?
Yes.
So you're bending that out of the way until it drops into this little slot. So this goes back in there like that. And so now I got to pull that spring back so that this slides through like that. And then I bend it so it goes into that slot again. There. So that's all there is to upgrading one of those or changing one of those out. So hope that clarifies it. But this is kind of annoying. I really don't like the extended mag release. I don't have any problem with the standard one. It's in a good place for me. And this is just, it's big and it's got a lot of sharp angles on it. I suppose I could take a file and just round it down a little bit, but it protrudes too far for my tastes.
Well, since we're talking about mag releases, there was some talk about if you swap the mag release to the other side for lefties, that the old mags wouldn't work anymore because they're lacking something. Have you heard anything about that?
Let's see. I don't. Yeah, maybe I don't have any old ones here. Let me see. I have a bunch. See, I think what you'd be running into is maybe some of the old ones didn't have this slot in them, because that's what the mag release is grabbing onto. Is it's locking into that slot. Maybe some of the earlier ones didn't have one on the right-hand side of the gun. That's the only thing I could think of. Because what it's doing is you can see down in here, I mean, on the left-hand side, it would be on the left side for a right or a left-handed person. But right here, there's a little bump, and that's what's locking into the magazine right here. So maybe if you had a magazine that didn't have one on the left-hand side, that's all I could think of. I don't know. I haven't been that into Glocks. I've shot them for years and years, but I've only owned them for probably the last 5 or 6. Finally broke down and decided to see what they were all about. They're
according to someone in chat, the old mags only have a notch on the one side.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could figure as to why they wouldn't work. So, but you know, modern. I run both the Glock mags, and this is a P mag, and I run these KCI, these Korean mags. They all work really well for me. I haven't had any issues with any of the aftermarket Glock mags. I also have some of those ETS clear plastic ones, and they run fine too. So don't be afraid of aftermarket mags. The Glock mags, you can always tell because they have the steel liner in them, and I think they probably last longer because of that. I can show you how to take a Glock mag apart too. This is normally you would on a SIG or Beretta, you just push down on that button and slide the plate off, but Glock mags don't work that way. And I had somebody, I filmed a little short video for the club out on the YouTube site, and the guy complained because he says I'm doing it the old-fashioned FUD way to take these mags apart, but it works. There is a tool that Glock will sell you to do this, but it's going to do essentially the same thing I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is grab a pair of pliers and show you how to do this. And if this doesn't agree with you, don't do it. But you just squeeze very lightly. You don't need to crush the magazine. You're just squeezing these two sides in because they kind of bow out a little bit to lock the plate in place. Let's give it a little bit of a squeeze. You push down on the button and then kind of pry loose like that. And the guy said, "Oh, you're going to crack your magazines doing that." I've done it this way for 30 years, and I've yet to break one of these magazines. That's all you need to do to get them apart. But what happens is, you know, people are used to, you know, other manufacturers where you just push that button down, and no matter how much you push, the base plate doesn't come off. You have to kind of squeeze the sides in just a little bit, and then it will then pop it forward with a punch or a screwdriver. So that's how you get them apart. You don't need to squeeze it to get them back together. It'll click back in place. So I don't know, whoever that guy is, he's probably mad at me again.
So you mentioned for new people, getting a stock one, swapping out the trigger, and then just running it.
Just the trigger springs in the connector. You don't even need to change the trigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that easy for a beginner?
Yeah, It's just those parts I showed you in here. It's the spring in here and the little connector. Those two pieces will make a big difference. It's easy to get them in there sideways. Unfortunately, it will go inside. Yeah.
Ed, I think you're streaming some of Scott from before because we just heard Scott talk with Scott not talking.
That was me. I'm sorry. I was trying to
never mind.
respond to someone's comment on.
Oh, yeah. But
when
it's
in doubt, blame Ed.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. If you have any questions, there's a lot of videos on how to do it, or just reach out to me and I'll walk you through it. But it will make a big difference if you don't like the kind of sponginess of the Glock triggers, which I don't know anybody that does. Though there's a lot of aftermarket stuff for Glock triggers. They say Glock perfection, and then the first thing everybody does is change them. But they're good guns. I
like mine just fine.
Yeah,
I'm also a newbie with, and I'm not very discerning yet.
No, they're fine. They're great guns. I have nothing bad to say about Glocks. They're just not necessarily my favorite.
Well, that is something bad to say. That said, are we done with the questions?
Yeah,
we are done with the questions. The only other one was related to that brake solvent, and it was answered in chat. That what is your favorite question that Eve just asked? We recommend you come to pub chat because that question will lead to hours of conversation there.
Mine personally is my SIG P320.
So not Glock.
Not Glock. I like Glocks, but I choose the 320.
I like Glocks, but that's a ringing endorsement. Anyway, so that's the care and feeding of your favorite plastic fantastic. Both the P80 variant and a standard variant.